Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. My guest today is a special one. He is at the helm of South Asia's largest hotel chain. Yes, I'm talking about Mr. Puneet Chhatwal, the Managing Director and CEO of the Indian Hotels Company Limited, popularly known as the Taj Group of Hotels. Taj being the flagship brand of the group. But now the company runs brands such as Taj Selections, Ginger Hotels, Vivanta, Taj Sats, which is a catering service, and also a stays and trails venture they recently started. Today, Mr. Chhatwal is going to speak to us about the big picture, about how the hotel and tourism industry can create jobs and be a growth driver for India. What are his expectations at the government and at the policy level, and also at the grassroots level in the states? Mr. Chhatwal, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Policy and Politics.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Chhatwal, could you give me an opening comment in terms of today's scenario of how the Indian market, you look at it today in 2019?
I think India is actually at a crossroad, a very important crossroad, because the opportunity, as we see both at Indian Hotels and as Tata Group, is possibly much larger than anybody else has said so in the last few years. And we think that India is going to grow by leaps and bounds in every sector, and definitely the sector closest to my heart is the hotel and tourism sector. And we are definitely going to witness a significant growth in this business in the years to come.
Okay, significant growth. So let us talk a few data points that I have here. India in 2018 saw the arrival of 10.5 million international tourists. Contrast this with China. 60 million tourists went to China. Thailand, which is a small country, gets 30 million tourists. Japan, again very small country, 31 million tourists. Hong Kong, 29 million tourists. This shows that there is a very huge untapped potential for India, isn't it?
Absolutely, and those figures, as you mentioned, speak for themselves. I mean, of the 10 million, I think we are coming from such a large base of Indian diaspora outside of India, people with OCI cards. And when they come to India to visit families, they're also counted in this figure of 10 million. So we have a very, very huge potential to go up with these numbers by 3 times, 4 times, 5 times in the years to come. However, we also need to have the infrastructure to receive this kind of tourists coming from outside. But I think it's a bit unfair if we keep talking only about foreign tourists. See, the domestic tourism potential of India is second to none.
Okay.
We have almost 500 to 700 million people that have started traveling. So when I was growing up in India, we used to travel, my parents used to get a leave travel concession, popularly called LTC. We used to go and live in our relatives' houses. Now people live in hotels, and very soon they'll be living in nicer hotels or in homestays, or want to experience something different like coffee plantations or the vineyards in Nasik. So all this is on the way, and I think for the sake of completeness, yes, foreign exchange earnings is important, but we should not ignore the potential of the demand within Indian continent itself.
I'm reminded of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, because until very recently he also made the same comment that Indians should go and see a lot of more India also. But
the Honorable Prime Minister is right, I think, and coming from the topmost position in India,
yes,
I think it's a very good signal. And there is a lot of religious tourism, spiritual journeys. There is a lot of historical monuments. There is a lot of beaches and sun and sand, and I think what we tend to ignore is the sea mass of India is actually larger than the land mass. That's completely unexplored, especially on the eastern coast, down from West Bengal to Tamil Nadu. We might have Goa and Kerala on one side, but the other side, there is a lot to be done. And I am quite optimistic that in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot will start happening in all these sectors that I've mentioned.
Now, since you are so positive about the India story in terms of what we can achieve, I want to ask you on the infrastructure front. You mentioned, what are your expectations that if this could happen, the industry can generate millions of more jobs? So what are these 3, 4, 5 things you want on the infrastructure front?
Well, I think one of the things is, why reinvent something when you have examples of how it has been done in other places?
Yes.
So let's forget countries which were always mature markets. Let's take some of those which are relatively new economies.
Okay.
So one of that comes to my mind is the former Eastern Germany. So if you look at former Eastern Germany, or the 5 states of the 5 new states which were combined with the reunification of Germany, they saw an infrastructure boom in the best highways, in the best airports, the best train stations, the largest what they call a Kopfbahnhof, a head train station of Europe in Leipzig. So I think the renaissance of the train stations, in whether it's in London or it's on the continental Europe, saw an excellent growth of hotel businesses and connectivity within cities all over the continent. So today, if you go to Vienna, traveling from Vienna to Prague or to Bratislava or to Budapest is so easy. And within the former Eastern Germany, it's even easier, and that's your gateway also in a way to the Eastern European countries. So I think they have done very well with that. That's one example. We can take the same example in Asia. Look at China. I mean, they have the best trains in the world. Some of the high-speed trains connecting Shanghai airport to the Shanghai city center at almost 400 kilometers an hour, or traveling from Beijing to Shanghai in 4 hours, was unthinkable, unimaginable almost 20 years ago. So I think all this is very important to develop the tourism, firstly within the country. But when also people come from outside, they're used to a certain standard.
Yes.
And they want to have, not such huge gaps in the way, travel is done these days and the way accommodations are done these days. Even a small country like Thailand, the moment you land in Bangkok airport, and if you wanted to go to Phuket or you wanted to go to Hua Hin or Koh Samui, it's so much easier than we have today, although we have made very, very good progress. So I have to say, I really like the Mumbai airport. I also like the Delhi airport.
Okay.
I think very nicely done. Bangalore airport is being redeveloped and is being increased in size. We have a wonderful hotel outside the Bangalore airport, and we have a wonderful hotel at the Santa Cruz at the domestic terminal. So all this goes hand in hand. And I
So
think,
you mean when you're speaking that infrastructure investment, tourists will follow. So you're hinting at...
absolutely.
So tourism will follow when you get the basics in place. You're saying they are improving, but to get to the level that we aspire to, a lot more needs to be done.
The infrastructure part
Yes.
is one part.
Yes.
The second is, an infrastructure includes roads, trains, highways, airports, and chopper services, etc.
Yes.
This also includes accommodations, restaurants, different kind of international foods, wines, soft drinks, etc.
Yes.
So I think that's one part of the
Okay.
thing. The second very important element is the Asian hospitality that we have.
The Asian,
The Indian hospitality is second to none. We have no issues like you might have on the Western Hemisphere in terms of serving. So we are happy to serve,
Yes.
with our whole philosophy of Atithi Devo Bhavo. It's quite a part of our spirit.
Culture.
It's a part of our culture.
I want to understand something from you here. See, India's first growth story came in the software exports business. We touch about 150 lakh crores of exports. Now, policymakers say that hotel and tourism is going to be the second untapped potential where we could do lakhs of crores of business. And today, Taj is about 150, 160 hotels. Taj could be 300 hotels, a majority of them in India itself, maybe 200, 250 hotels in India itself if this was, or maybe much more. How could this happen?
Firstly, I just can't resist making a comment. So we have 150 plus in operation and another 40 plus in pipeline.
Already.
So we are almost, within the next few months, we would have had a portfolio of 200.
Okay.
So, and a portfolio of 250 or 300 is imminent and is a part of our Aspiration 2022 strategy.
Okay.
But we said we'll discuss not so much about Taj, but more about
the industry.
More about the industry. So, but I could not resist saying this one. I think a lot of growth will come through all possible brands in the industry, hotel brands, airline brands, restaurant brands, and I think that is also needed. Competition is always good. Competition, keeps you on your toes, and it also leads to innovation. Continuous innovation happens if there is competition.
Now, a pointed question, out of the total tourist arrivals in India, Bangladesh contributes about 1/5, that's 2 million, followed by 1.4 million that are coming from America, then 1 million from United Kingdom, that is followed, all under 4 lakhs is Sri Lanka, Canada, Australia, Malaysia, China, Germany and Russia, all under 4 lakhs. Now, if these 7 countries, Sri Lanka, Canada, Australia, Malaysia, China, Germany, Russia, even if we can double it to 4 to 8 lakhs, and I'm talking of countries, which have spending power, which are a target audience even for your group. Now, for that to happen, do you think that we ought to focus on our tourist spots more, like the Buddhist spots, or the spots which are, currently the Red Fort was given to a corporate to maintain it well? You think a lot of changes happen how we market our tourist spots? Is that's where we are lacking? For example, Amitabh Khan did a great job with promoting Kerala, where he did a huge campaign, which was superbly successful. People credit Amitabh Khan for that. Do we need more of that now?
Absolutely. I think the kind of impulse that Amitabh Khan set out with the Incredible India campaign and God's Own Country with Kerala is quite exemplary, and also demonstrates what can be done and how not just a full infrastructure of government or companies can make a difference, how individuals can also make a difference. So I'm glad you mentioned that name, but I also feel that a structured way, a structured marketing campaign supported by infrastructure development, supported by the quality of service, supported by something which I could not finish talking in the earlier question, was the talent.
Okay.
We have a lot of talent. We have a lot of educated people. All they need is a bit more exposure and a bit more training, and in order to provide that quality service. But the good news is we have a lot of young population, and we have a lot of people who need jobs. So tourism sector is the biggest multiplicator of jobs globally. So 10% of the global GDP comes from tourism. 10% of all the jobs also created in the world comes from tourism. And we are close to like 7-ish%, and I think there also we have a long way to go.
Can we take a case study here? If we speak of Taj Group today, how many people directly and indirectly would be dependent on the Group A? And if you could just double your size, how much could you earn?
So today we employ almost 28,000 people in all the group businesses, and another 5,000 internationally.
Okay.
So indirectly, I think this almost 30,000 jobs within India create another 150,000 jobs in different other sectors, whether it's chauffeur-driven services for the cars, or it is buses, or it is people supplying bread, or people supplying, all other kinds of.
So you're talking that Taj Group impacts, say, about 1,80,000 people today, which in terms
definitely,
of,
if not more.
In terms of families, I'm speaking about 8 to 10 lakh people, because families depend on people who are employed. So you're impacting the lives of around close to 1 million people. And if doubled, you could do 2 million people.
Absolutely, not only us, I think together with all other groups.
Of course, everybody grows.
It is definitely as I said, the airline industry, the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, the entire tourism industry is one of the biggest multiplicators of jobs. So if you have the extension of Bangalore airport, and you have so many more people coming into Bangalore, then you need the flight kitchen services, you need hotel services, you need people taking on shops under licenses in the airport, outside the airport. So it's a multiplicator like second to none compared to any other industry in the world. And with the technology advancement, especially that India has made with some of the great leading companies globally, I think we have to just collaborate in a very positive way to kind of, untap, to have this untapped potential realized into something which can be very big in 5 to 10 years' time.
Very interesting. We are at this juncture, as Mr. Puneet Chhatwal says, on the verge of takeoff. He himself is talking about 200 hotels just for the Taj Group. But he says that if these 5-6 things are done right, not only can he employ or maybe double his employment if India grows at that rate, but also the overall industry employment ratio and figures will go up. We'll take a short break and be right back at this point.
What I have with myself today is OnePlus 7T Pro. Here in my hand is the Apple Watch Series 5. Job employment that Vivo has done for India, which is excellent. So when we talk about the Indian market, how has sales been so far?
We as a brand have grown at 3x to 4x of the industry, and that I think I must congratulate both the Vivo family as well as a big thank you to all our customers.
Welcome back. Just before the break, we had Mr. Puneet Chhatwal sharing with us that if certain things are done right, for example, he also shared the example of Amitabh Kant with us, where he did the campaign of God's Own Country, Incredible India, which of course gathered or got India its own share of tourists. So he also told us that you don't need the whole government as such to move. Even if a few bureaucrats move and take some proactive steps, things do get impacted. Am I right, Mr. Chhatwal?
Absolutely. I think what the government can do is in terms of policy, which it has actually done.
Yes.
A reduction in GST. We had the highest rates in GST that one would have heard of. And if
so
you want to,
28%.
Most of our portfolio was at 28%. Which makes India a very expensive country. So, if your hotels are expensive because your airlines and the airline traffic is not the same as in other countries, so tickets are expensive, and if your infrastructure on the road is not that great, then the cars and the transportation between, airport to the hotel or between two cities is expensive. So it becomes a very expensive destination. But I think the government has taken the right steps by reducing the GST, by changing the visa fees, by introduction of e-visas. I think there are a few more things which we can do. For example, if you want to build hotels in a sector like Buddhist sector.
Okay.
So Buddhist sector, you have to get to some main hub airport. One hub. So, maybe let's say Patna is the airport you need to get to.
Right.
So something has to happen at that airport and how to attract more flights, both domestic and international.
So
that's one.
So aviation ministry also chips in there.
So aviation ministry, but more importantly, when the government provides the land on a license to develop a property, I think it is very interesting to see how this will evolve over the years, because some of those tenders are not as successful as they should be, as we have seen in different properties in Delhi. We bid for some, we won also some are still, pending, no decision could be taken, we have to follow certain kind of international rules. And one of that, for example, is you have a 99-year license at a peppercorn rent. So that would facilitate investment from a hotel company or from private equity companies or from institutional investors to build a property, because you have
huge investment.
You have a huge investment, and 33 years is not long enough to amortize.
So you cannot expect to invest 300, 400, 500, 600 crores in a property for 33 years. You would at least need 60, 70, 80 years minimum.
Correct. Because there is nothing like a straight line in economies. Economies goes up and they go down.
Because you shared this with me, as I understand, you have properties in Rajasthan. Jai Mahal Palace is one of those.
Correct.
You have the Lake Palace with you, and Bombay you have the Taj Mahal Palace and Tower. And I believe these are one of the marquee properties you have, which on their own generate tourist interest, people who come just to stay there. have we tapped that potential of palaces, or do you think India still has that potential to tap many more?
I think we have a potential to tap many more.
Is it?
Many more. In all the states of India,
Yeah.
there is still a big opportunity. We have been, I would say 30 years ago, the group took the initiative, had a huge role to play in creating certain destinations like Kerala. We've just opened a property in Havelock in Andaman and Nicobar, and these destinations take time to develop and evolve.
So you're investing for decades.
And we are investing for decades, and everyone knows and talks about how Goa got created with the first property, the Taj Fort Aguada,
Yes.
way back in the 70s, and
Yes.
it was the first real nice property in Goa. And today there are 200 plus good hotels in the state of Goa. So I think similarly on the palaces, you mentioned some. I mean, Lake Palace is the most photographed hotel in the world.
Yes, is it so?
It is so. And then we have, you mentioned Jai Mahal Palace, we have the Rambagh Palace, we have the Falaknuma in Hyderabad, we have the Umaid Bhavan in Jodhpur. All the famous weddings have taken place in Umaid Bhavan.
If I'm not wrong, these palaces stand out and are known all over the world by their own names, because tourists would come just to visit your Udaivilas Jai Mahal Palace, or...
Well, I think that would be a bit unfair. I think it's both. It's both the Taj and the names of the palaces. I have always said this. If you tell me, anybody, if you ask an unprompted question, give me two names that you know from India, and then they would say Gandhi and Taj.
Right.
So, of course, many other names have evolved in this thing, but these are the two most common ones internationally.
Now, since you spoke about the Buddhist circuit, the Union Tourism Ministry is taking small measures in its own ways, putting up signage in Chinese, and there was demand from Chinese tourists that they want guides in Chinese, because most of them can't speak English or Hindi or any other language. They are comfortable in Chinese, so we need skilled manpower there. And some figures here: about 50 lakh Chinese tourists travel globally, only about 3.2 lakh come to India. Now, even if we can double it, that's great news for business groups like you, but how can we double it? Merely putting signage spots wouldn't suffice. Maybe.
Well, every little step in the journey is important, and it is the sum of the steps that will complete the journey. So I think having some signage in other languages, having people speaking that language, we have always had tours from the Western Hemisphere, and we have had lots of guides speaking French, German, Spanish.
Right.
So, and I think Indians have an inherent capability of speaking 2 or 3 languages.
Yes.
So, if they can speak those 2 or 3, they can speak one more also, and if that's where the jobs are going to get created.
Do you think the government can play its role in training people as these language guides, and that can then be deployed even to various hotels as well as other places, and that could help you a bit? Is that something you expect from the government?
I would say, I'm not into, putting the onus on government or private equity,
No, but
or
government
into
has
the
bodies like the National Skills Development Corporation.
I think government has been doing that. We have we have great examples since last 40-50 years of different cultural centers teaching the languages. We've had a Japanese cultural center in Delhi. We've had the Max Muller Bhavan teaching German. We've had Alliance Française teaching the French. We have Italian cultural center teaching Italian. I think maybe what can be done is families with a certain income level could be incentivized in one way or the other through tax breaks, and that's how some of the good case studies are across the world in how, when children were supposed to learn something which is not very common, let's say Chinese language per se, then maybe there could be some form of a tax incentive, or it's deducted from the tax, because it's money spent on the family in acquiring skills that are not there today.
Now, small baby steps have been taken. The Union Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on this November 20th, signed an MOU between India and Finland to increase cooperation in the tourism sector. The government let out a note which said that currently we have 21,000 tourists from Finland. Of course, the country has a very small population, but also, if even this can be doubled, that's about 20,000 more people coming into India. Do you think that the European market for India is still untapped? We still need to get a lot more European tourists into this country?
Absolutely, I think it is really untapped, and with the new aircrafts coming, into operation, the Dreamliner, for example.
Yes.
The Europeans always seek on holidays, sun and sand.
Yes.
And we have that.
We have ample 7,000, like you mentioned at the start of the interview. Can you create 3 or 4 more Goas? Because I believe Goa does wonderfully well for you. Can we have? Because
they are going to get created. I said that at the start of the interview.
Yes.
It is happening
also,
as we.
I don't know if it's as big as Goa.
No, it's not as big as Goa, but it's a nice little, French flavor place,
Yes.
and it has something unique to offer. But I think for the Europeans to come, it's easy with sun and sand. And what the Honorable Prime Minister did in Finland
Yes.
is a move more important than Finland.
Yes.
Your question was if 21,000 can become 42,000. No. Finland is a part of the Nordics.
Yes.
It's not part of Scandinavia. Scandinavia is Sweden, Norway, and Denmark.
Yes.
But it is included in the Nordics. And Finland is the gateway to the Nordics, which includes these 3 countries. At the same time, we have had new flight routes between India and Stockholm, for example, and maybe soon Copenhagen and Oslo, etc. So I think that's a great market, and it has very high disposable income. Norway is a very rich country. So I think Finland, just as Finland, is maybe not as interesting as the whole strategy of, using Finland as a platform to tackle the Nordics.
Right. So you mean you see a lot of untapped potential that will be realized?
Absolutely. We've just started.
Yeah.
See, as a country that got independence less than 100 years ago, creating jobs was more important. That's why we had the public sector. We had the India Tourism Development Corporation called the ITDC,
Yes.
which started with the basics in tourism and the basics in Khajuraho and Madurai, etc. And over time, India's become, growing market. Then it became from a growing to almost a mini mature market. So all these things are evolving.
So now you see we're ready for takeoff, and we can also be in the big league of say 40 million or 30 million tourists a year. You see India going there in the next 10 years?
I have no doubt it will be there.
Yeah.
Not going there, it will be.
You're certain it will be there?
Will be there at the moment. We should not look at 1 or 2 quarters all the time.
Yes.
If we look at the
Maybe
long-term
5 or 10
story
year
of
view.
India, if you take a 5-year, 10-year view, India is very, very well positioned. It is very rich in its heritage. It's very rich in, as I said, sun and sand. It's very rich in its spiritual tourism. And the world is now beginning to take a more holistic view of things. It's not anymore about just capitalism. It's not anymore just about socialism. It's also about the holistic view of doing the right things at the right time. And I think that platform is best provided on the Indian subcontinent.
Okay. So you have big plans for Northeast?
So we have very big plans for Northeast. It has lovely tea plantations, and for our homestay business, it's great. But it's not just our business. I think these are huge potential markets which have not even started rolling.
And
just
begun
imagine.
to tap them.
And we've just begun to tap
Very
them. Imagine
interesting.
what happens.
Very interesting. Just day before yesterday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, "Go and see the Northeast." There you are, Mr. Chhatwal's putting up 2 5-star hotels there. But great piece of news. Thank you so much. We're totally out of time, but thank you so much, Chhatwal, Mr. Chhatwal, for sharing your time with us on policy and politics. We'd like to revisit this issue again in 3 to 4 months and see where we have reached and what's yet to cover. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.